Hello, I'd like to welcome you to our second video on the wines of Germany, and we are talking about the specific wine regions Baden, Pfalz, and Rheinhessen. To start with, I give you quickly an overview on the topics we are going to cover. So we are talking first of all a bit about where those regions are located. We're talking about key facts, the most important wine regions here, the climate and the growing conditions here, a bit of an historical overview. We're talking about major grape varieties from that regions, wine styles and typical winemaking techniques, some specific wine terms for that regions, and some important further facts, and giving you some examples of leading producers and some specific labels from there. So the region of Baden you find here, left-hand side along the Rhine, close or directly at the border to France, till down to Switzerland. Then north of that we have Pfalz, and directly north of Pfalz we have the region called Rheinhessen. Size-wise, those belong to the biggest wine growing regions in Germany. Rheinhessen, first of all, is the biggest one with 26,500 hectares approximately. Then it is Pfalz with 23,567 hectares, and 15,800 hectares approximately you find in the region of Baden. While looking at the specific varieties that we find in those regions, first of all, starting with Baden, we find to a majority white wines like Müller-Thurgau, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, Riesling, and Chasselas, and Pinot Noir. Pfalz is dominated, at least plantation-wise, a bit more by red varieties than Baden. We have Dornfelder and Portugieser as major or mainly planted red varieties here. And in terms of whites, we have Riesling and Müller-Thurgau here. Rheinhessen, bit more dominated by white wines, Müller-Thurgau, Riesling, and Sylvaner, the major white varieties, and Dornfelder, the major red variety in that region. So, herewith I want to give you some key facts. First of all, starting with Baden to the left-hand side, you see it is quite a big region, also in terms of distance from southern tip to northern tip. So we find it from 47th degree latitude until 49.75 degree north. In terms of altitude, we find viticulture quite low to the Rhine, 150 meter above sea level, and then it's going up to 560 meters. Mainly this is along Lake Constance, where we have, due to the buffering effect of the water, the possibility to go that high in altitude. The average grape growing season temperature is 15.8 degree, and it is in fact the warmest grape growing region, or the warmest region in Germany per se. The average annual rainfall is comparatively high to other regions with 835 millimeter. It is, in terms of viticulture in Germany, quite humid. The harvest with the most rainfall is October. So this leads us to some principal viticultural hazards, which are fungal diseases, excessive rain in terms of erosion. Frost can also occur, especially while you have bigger terraces in some regions. There, late frosts are still a major concern. Pfalz, the region a bit more north, you find in a latitude level between 49th degree roundabout. Its altitude, it's approximately around 95 meters. It's more or less flat, more flat than other regions. The average growing season temperature is 15.7 degrees Celsius. The average rainfall is 668 millimeter, and the harvest month rainfall is in September, 49 millimeters, and common principal viticultural hazards are hail, frost, late frost, fungal infections, animal pests, like we see in the last years with red varieties in terms of Drosophila Suzuki. The production volume is more than double the volume compared to Baden. This goes back to white varieties that can crop in a quite high level. Rheinhessen is an area with 26,860 hectares, and you find it viticulture here in an altitude between 85 to 268 meters, also comparatively flat. You have some slight hilly areas there, but not really that you would work in steep slopes. The average growing season temperature is 16.1 degrees Celsius. The average rainfall is 550 millimeters. One of the driest regions in Germany per se, around Alsa, is also to be found there. And you see that with the harvest rainfall in the month October of 34 millimeter, it's quite low. Principal viticultural hazards are late frost in spring and a bit of soil erosion. The production volume is the highest with 2.56 million hectoliters each year. And like you see here in the bottom, mainly dominated with 71.7% whites, Riesling, Müller-Thurgau, Dornfelder, Sylvaner, Pinot Gris, and just 28.3% of reds. So you see specifically in that region a huge variation in terms of varieties. So to continue here, we are now talking a bit more in detail about the specific features of the three regions, starting with Baden. Baden is split into multiple distinct areas, in German called Bereiche. That's important for the labeling or for the legislation. The region itself stretches almost for 400 kilometers, just from north of Heidelberg down to the Swiss border in the south, close to Lörrach or close to Basel in Switzerland. In the north, there is a focus on the varieties Rivana, or as a synonym of that, Müller-Thurgau, Riesling and Gewürztraminer and Pinot Meunier. In the middle, you find a bit more Pinot Noir, Riesling and Gewürztraminer, which also indicates Alsace is just on the opposite side of the Rhine. And in the south, the so-called Breisgau, red and white Pinot varieties are dominating. Pinot Noir is major red variety here, but in terms of whites, you get Pinot Blanc and Pinot Gris as major white varieties. Baden is, as mentioned before, Germany's warmest but also sunniest and one of the driest wine producing regions. There is no definite Baden wine type. So the differences in terms of climate conditions and soil, as well as cultural influences, they are just too great. In that huge stretch, we have so many different wine styles. We have specifically in that regions a very high importance of cooperatives. So most growers here are members of the approximately 100 cooperatives that produce round about 85% of the region's wine. The warm and dry conditions make Baden ideal for the production of high volume and, yeah, due to that also sometimes inexpensive plants. While there are many small estates, small in terms of production size, there are cooperatives responsible for around 85% of Baden's production. Led in terms of size by the Badischer Winzerkeller, located in the city of Breisach, which is also one of the largest cooperatives in Germany. Nevertheless, there are areas with a reputation for producing high quality wines, here mainly based on Pinot varieties such as Kaiserstuhl or the Bereich or area of Ortenau, and also the area of Thuniberg and around Breisgau. The Pfalz is the second largest wine growing region of Germany. It stretches from the southern rim of Rheinhessen near Worms down to the border with Alsace in France. The vineyards are not centered along a river valley, so they are found spread all over. And due to warmer temperatures, wines tend to be here slightly full-bodied with riper fruit flavors compared to other growing regions in Germany. Sorry. About 1/4 of German wines are grown in the Pfalz. Quality wine production is dominated by smaller estates and by some cooperatives with really good quality levels. Areas with higher reputation for producing high quality wines are found in Mittelhart, so around the city of Bad Dürkheim, Wachenheim, Forst, Deidesheim and Ruppertsberg, which is mainly in the northern part of the Pfalz. Rheinhessen is the largest wine region in Germany. It covers about 1/4 of the German vineyard area, even a little bit more. It is a relatively warm but also dry region. About 20% of this region is under vine, so it's really intensively cultivated here. The majority of its vineyards is planted in the warm and fertile valley floors, which are ideal for the production of high volume wines. Due to that, often quite inexpensive wines, quite mechanized, bigger plots here possible. And due to the fertile conditions, also higher crop levels if the viticulturists want, they can have quite high crops here in those fertile lands. Even though there are really good producers, bulk production still dominates the region. We have round about 2,400 wine producers here. A bit more have them that are producing bottled wines, and still a very high number producing bulk wine, which is then processed by bigger companies. The quality wine production is dominated here by small estates and by small or some cooperatives. Areas with a higher reputation in terms of producing high quality wines are around the city of Nierstein at the Rhine, and also nearby Nackenheim, but also Oppenheim and the subregion in the south called Wonnegau. Coming now to a bit more specific information about climate, grape growing and soil types in that regions here. To start with, the climate in Baden is very sunny and warm. As mentioned before, one of the sunniest and warmest, or the warmest region in Germany. The climate, nevertheless, is very changeable. It offers varied season with cold winters, but warm and sometimes short summers. It's the only German wine growing region that is assigned to the European wine growing zone B. The others are all belonging to viticultural zone A, so indicating that we are here a bit warmer. On the other hand, it means that the wines must have a higher so-called oxalic degree, so higher sugar levels at harvest. Climate hazards are here. We can have excessive rains, frosts at higher elevations, especially like we are having bigger terraces where cold air can assemble. Erosion in steep slopes is a problem, and yeah, while the spot is a bit cooler, underripeness and fungal diseases due to the sometimes bit more humid summers that we can have. The climate in the Pfalz is warm and temperate with about 1,800 hours of sunshine. The Pfalz is one of the sunniest and warmest regions in Germany. So after Baden, the northern part counts among the driest regions of Germany, so close to the border of Rheinhessen. Moist and warm winds from the west and the southern help nevertheless to get warm, moderate temperatures both in summer and in winter. Climate hazards can be hail on a quite small scale, frost in terms of late frost, especially in the sites that are in kind of bowls or a bit more valley-like areas, fungal diseases, but also animal pests, like recently Drosophila suzuki is bringing severe problems for red wine production here in humid vintages. The climate in Rheinhessen, this region is one of the driest. It's warm in summer and quite mild in winter. It's, besides being one of the driest regions in Germany, also one of the driest in Central Europe. Rainfall brought by summer rainstorms can quickly be gone again by evaporation. In combination with high temperatures, climate hazards can be soil erosion due to severe rainfall events, and nighttime spring frost can cause considerable damage also in that region here. Baden, it's mainly known for its red wines. Nevertheless, besides Pinot Noir, we have here quite a lot of other interesting varieties, and the share of white varieties is way higher. Most growers are members of cooperatives, and wine growing is a kind of their second job. So it's for some a hobby, for sometimes a bit more. Flatter vineyards have become more attractive because of lower operation costs, and due to that, like we see also here in the upper pictures, quite big terraces were created to help a bit more mechanization to be used. The best quality of the grapes occurs on terraces and slopes, which add definitely certain costs. Also in areas with volcanic soils, we'll find many of those terraces, quite typical for the so-called Kaiserstuhl. The grape production in Baden goes back to 63% whites and 37% of reds, where Pinot Noir is the dominating variety. The Pfalz, as quite dry German wine growing region, we have south or east facing, sometimes bit steeper sloping vineyards in the foothills of the Hart, where they gain a maximum sunshine and they are protected from cooler winds coming from the higher areas. This is contributing to the production of really ripe and full-bodied wines. Most renowned vineyards are in an area known as Mittelhart, as mentioned before, around Bad Dürkheim, Wachenheim, Forst, Deidesheim, Ruppertsberg, and the northern part of the Pfalz. In Pfalz, we have 65% of white wines and 34% red wines, more or less similar share compared to Baden. For whites, more than 65%, we have the majority grown by the variety Riesling. Rheinhessen is the area with the highest yields per hectare in Germany, so indicating we have here bulk wine production still dominating, and plantics are still on the rise to supply it, so we have this region still willing to grow. However, a number of areas are establishing a reputation for production of high quality wines, especially the section of the more steeper sloping vineyards along the west bank of the Rhine. East facing aspect of these vineyards mean they receive sun in the coolest part of the day, which can enhance ripeness. So typical example for that is Roter Hang in Nierstein. The grape production in Rheinhessen has even a bit higher share of white wine. 71% is planted with white varieties, 28% approximately planted by red varieties. Riesling is the most planted variety here, just ahead of Müller-Thurgau. So the climate in terms of a bit more details in Baden, the north of Baden, which is the Badische Bergstraße, but also Tauberfranken. We get fine earth soils, which are marked by less loam. It's nearby to the hills of the so-called Odenwalds, which can have deposits of thrift sand. In Ortenau, we have weathered granite, and in the Kaiserstuhl, we have steep south-facing slopes with volcanic soils as an origin. And even more south than that, in the Markgräfler Land, we have loamy, less limestone areas. In Pfalz, there is a wide variety of soils, so including limestone, sandstone, basalt, or clay soils, where producers are exploiting to give wines a kind of widely differing characteristics and flavors, so quite high diversity here to be found even in smaller areas. Further south, with more fertile sandstone soils, traditionally it's an area where also higher yields are produced. More powerful structures, Rieslings, come from Pfalz more calcareous soils. For Rheinhessen, it's to be said, in addition to the extensive loess soils, there are different sedimentary and weathered soils, sandy, fine marl, in rich layers, and in the western part of the region, even weathered quartzite, and furthermore, stone-rich soils here. The term Rotliegendes refers to a red, slaty, sandy clay soil in the steep riverfront vineyards of Nackenheim and Nierstein. Near Mainz and Bingen, there is an outcropping quartzite slate to be found, which gives really unique Rieslings there. So some historical overview on the three different wine growing regions. Starting with Baden, although this wine region has a long history in producing wines, neither the initial color or the quality of the earliest wines that were produced is really known. In the Kraichgau region, the high noble counts of Katzenelnbogen received their title, and they were quite famous for supporting viticulture since the 12th century. The economic crisis in the 19th century had severe effects on the Baden wine growing industry, and this finally led to many cooperatives being produced or being set up. This helped to save the Baden wintners from the severe influence of phylloxera and the worldwide economic crisis here. Pfalz, although wild varieties of the vine were most probably native in Palatine region or Pfalz region, the Romans were in charge of bringing the first cultivated vines and wine growing techniques a bit more than 2,000 years ago to this region. Over the centuries, wine growing culture in Pfalz oscillated between splendor and despair, as it is sometimes said. After economic collapses and wars, the vineyards were destroyed at the end of the 17th century. Now comes a nice German term, Flurbereinigung, so meaning the restructuring of many smaller plots to bit bigger plots. In the 1980s, raised the quality of the area's vineyards to modern standards, and by the end of the 20th century, Palatine wines are actually gathering international notice for their quality more and more. Already the Romans introduced viticulture to the Rheinhessen region. More than 2,000 years ago, we found, especially around the fortifications of cities that we now know nowadays as Mainz and Bingen. Liebfrauenmilch is originally from that region, especially around Oppenheim. It nevertheless made it to a kind of brand or synonym for semi-sweet wine, sometimes even more sweet than that. Produced in several German wine growing regions, it became responsible for much of the erosion of German wine's reputation, especially in the 80s, 90s, in terms of export. After the Second World War, many new varieties and breeds were introduced, especially here. And in 1971, the changed legislation also put even more emphasis on the concentration of sugar in that region. Today, the region is again trying to focus more on traditional varieties like Riesling, but also other Pinot varieties. So now we will get an overview of the major white varieties from that regions, starting with Müller-Thurgau as white variety. It has an origin going back to 1882. Mr. Hermann Müller in Geisenheim breeded Riesling with a variety called Madeleine Royale. Initially, it was thought that it was Riesling and Sylvaner that was breeded. Backbreedings actually pointed out this was not the case. Modern DNA analysis finally showed that it was Riesling as one of the breeding parents, but Madeleine Royale, a table grape, was the other breeding partner. There are, depending on the variety, the country where it is grown, there are some other varieties than Müller-Thurgau, for example, Rivana that we know from Luxembourg, or in Switzerland, sometimes still called Riesling times Sylvaner. It is suitable for the cultivation on rather vigorous and soils. It's quite sensitive to chlorosis, so compactness of the soils leading to a nutrient deficiency. It is preferably to be planted in sufficiently rich soils. It's very short vegetation cycle makes this variety well suited for northern or mountain areas, cooler spots, and nevertheless its resistance to winter frost is just moderate. So not to be planted in two continental climates. Müller-Thurgau is susceptible to downy mildew and to gray rot. So especially when there is a high pressure in terms of botrytis due to warm, humid conditions, the variety's quality is suffering. Technologically, it has a potential that the bunches and the berries are small or small to medium in size. Its wines are generally light but uncomplicated with a flowery bouquet and mild in acidity. Müller-Thurgau often even carries a hint of muscat in its flavor, and the wines are to be consumed fresh, young, and it also makes a delightful, easy drinking sparkling wine. You find decent qualities from Müller-Thurgau in terms of sparkling wine, for instance, in northern Italy, in Trento Doc, in higher areas. Quite interesting when it comes to this variety and sparkling wine. Dornfelder is a new breed from Germany, originally going back to breed between Helfensteiner and Herold-Rebe, breeded in the 1950s in the research center of Weinsberg in southern Germany. It has another synonym which means just Weinsberg. It is a vigorous, quite productive variety. It is early to mid budding and ripening. The yields should be or has to be controlled to get good fruit concentration. Otherwise, it's just too massive in its yields, and it's susceptible to not very much diseases due to its quite thick skins. It's very robust against botrytis. Dornfelder can produce wines that are deep in color, definitely also high in acidity with fruity and floral notes. It was initially bred to serve as a blending wine to improve also kind of color, so nearly similar to Tanqueray variety because it's really rich in red wine color. It can produce two quite distinct styles of wine, a fruity, easy drinking style, occasionally with residual sugar, so semi-sweet Dornfelders are also to be found. You get aromas of sour cherry and blackberry. And on the other hand, you could also, if you reduce a bit crop load, you can get more complex wine styles with aging potential and putting a bit more focus on tannins and structure. You can even ferment or age it in oak. Grauburgunder or Pinot Gris, it corresponds to the gray mutation of Pinot Noir. It's fairly common to find variations with white grapes on the same trunk of a vine. We have many synonyms. The most well-known here is probably Pinot Grigio from Italy. The variety is rather vigorous but not very productive, so yields are not that high. It is well adapted to even cooler regions. It can be grown on rather deep limestone, relatively dry and well exposed terroirs, so here quite suitable for many different terroirs. It's not very sensitive to winter cold, and the fruit production is good while following spring frost. The variety is just a little sensitive to gray rot and to downy mildew. Technically, it shows that the bunches and berries are
quite small in its size. It can produce wines with great finesse, very powerful, full-bodied, and in a certain way also aromatic. Nevertheless, it's not rich in any specific fruity or floral primary characteristic. The sugar accumulation potential is high, and the acidity is usually lower and moderate. Wines have a pronounced yellow color and specific aromas compared, for instance, to Pinot Blanc. As being a bit more neutral than other varieties, it's also an ideal wine when you are unsure what the preference of, let's say, your guests are. Coming to the next Pinot variety, Weißburgunder or Pinot Blanc. This variety corresponds to a white mutation of Pinot Noir. It also has quite many different synonyms. Pinot Bianco or Pinot Blanc are, besides Weißburgunder, the most important. Weißburgunder is quite vigorous and displays a regular productivity. It's more productive than Pinot Gris and more than Pinot Noir. It is suitable to be grown on deep soils, rather hot, stony, or not. Pinot Blanc is also quite resistant to cooler conditions. The variety is rather delicate in terms of sensitivity to main diseases. It is a little bit sensitive to chlorosis, so compaction of soils due to too much heavy machines in the vineyards. Technically, it shows a potential as the bunches are usually quite small to medium in its size, and the berries are also small as well. It can produce pleasant, light-bodied, moderate in terms of acidity wines. This variety can also be used to make base wines for sparkling wines, and in some cooler areas, it's also a very interesting alternative to a bit more acidic Rieslings. Sylvaner, it's a variety found originally in central of Europe, coming from Austria and being spread in other European countries. It's a variety that gives a steady production. It is, however, rather sensitive to spring frost, and its wood, so meaning the canes has sometimes difficulties to lignify, so you need longer growing seasons here. Sylvaner is not suitable for terroirs that induce too much of chlorosis, so also here take care with soil compactness. Sylvaner is very sensitive to powdery mildew, downy mildew, and gray rot. So pest management in the vineyard is quite a delicate topic here. The bunches of Sylvaner are rather small, and the berries are also quite small and medium in size, so can also lead to quite compact bunches. Therefore, we see the high risk in terms of gray rot. Sylvaner produces fairly lively wines that have delicate aromas, sometimes going into a direction of earthy aromas as well. Under favorable circumstances and with reduced yields, the variety can produce wines that are ampler and with even more complexity. So let's continue with wine styles and specific winemaking strategies in those three different German growing areas. Starting with Baden again, dry wines in Baden represent 65% of its production. Pinot Noir from Baden is among Germany's best red wines, with complex flavors often enhanced by oak aging, mainly in barricks, but also in bigger wooden barrels. In Kaiserstuhl, they produce the fullest bodied wines with usually very high alcohol levels. 14% is not uncommon. Smoky, ripe fruit flavors. In cooler areas, such as the area of Ortenau, the wines have more acidity and usually are a bit more delicate in terms of fruit flavors. Baden produces a high volume. You find many inexpensive blends here. You would wonder how cheap or why they are so cheap sometimes. However, you also find there really good Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, and Chardonnay, often aged in oak. Riesling only takes a relatively small area, but you find some high quality here as well, and some more fuller bodied examples for Riesling are produced here as well. Pfalz tend to be slightly fuller bodied Rieslings and riper fruit flavors than those to Rheinhessen, as it is also close by or just at the border to Alsace. The foothills of the Hart gain maximum sunshine and are protected from winds, contributing to the production of ripe, full-bodied Riesling here. In the south, the area of Südliche Weinstraße was traditionally an area for inexpensive wine production as well. However, in recent years, a new generation of winemakers has led to an increased quality here and working on improving the reputation of wines from that area as well, particularly for Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, and other Pinot varieties. Rheinhessen is still to a high extent producing bulk wine, but the quality wine production is on the rise, and it's dominated by small estates and some cooperatives in areas near the Rhine. Riesling is often shown to have ripe lemon and peach flavors, and for instance, Rieslings from Rote Hang in Nierstein are said to be even showing smoky characteristics. The Wonnegau area in the south of Rheinhessen, close by to Pfalz, is also gaining a reputation for high quality Riesling, but also for really interesting Pinot Noirs. Now coming to some examples of that areas for leading producers. In Baden, where still the cooperatives are responsible for the majority of wine production, mainly led by Badischer Winzerkeller, we also have really interesting, smaller, high-quality wineries like Salvay, Franz Keller, or Huber. They are among the most recognized wineries here. In Pfalz, we have significant producers that include Dr. Böckling-Wolf, Rings, and the cooperative of Deidesheim, the so-called Winzerverein. Bassermann Jordan, Buhl, and von Winning are also quite well-known producers from that area, and there are even more. Rheinhessen significant producers include Weingut Gunderloch in Nierstein on the so-called Rheinterrasse, and Weingut Keller closer to Worms, and the winery of Philipp Wittmann. Finally, coming to some example for classic or typical labels from that region. Here we have some examples for classic labels from Baden. So you see they are packed with information, different sizes of fonts, and quite a lot of information. And while you are not a specialist, sometimes really difficult to understand what means Erzeugerabfüllung and all that numbers, etc. Maybe an exception are on the bottom line to the left and to the right some a bit more cleaner labels. Also here some classic labels from the Pfalz, so you see it also full with old school paintings, pictures, logos, so look really old-fashioned except from bottom line in the middle, the label, and here from Rheinhessen also quite typical labels that are also important when it is still coming to export. So you'll find landscapes, castles on it, the Rhine, and also here quite a lot of terms. On the bottom line here, we find more modern, cleaner labels from the three leading producers of that region. So after all that information, we are summing up the lecture with a quiz. And first question is, what is the production model presented by Baden, Pfalz, and Rheinhessen regions? Could you answer that? And second question is, what are the challenges for producers seeking to improve the quality and the reputation of the areas? Okay, so I would like to thank you for listening to my lecture.